So our next step was the TCA cycle. This is where all of the acetyl-CoA is going to enter next. Now, a few things that I want to mention about this. TCA cycle stands for the citric acid cycle, but technically it's also sometimes referred to as the Krebs cycle. It's the same thing. And the acetyl-CoA is going to need to enter into the cycle to continue metabolism, but before it can enter the cycle, it needs to bind onto oxaloacetate. If oxaloacetate is not present, acetyl-CoA cannot enter into the TCA cycle. Now, oxaloacetate is made from pyruvate, so that's where we are going to get our oxaloacetate from. But let's go ahead and take a look at the diagram to see exactly how this is going to happen. So this over here is showing us the TCA cycle. I know there's a lot going on here. I don't need you guys to memorize all of it, so I'm just going to point out to you what it is that I want you to know. So the first thing that I want to point out is oxaloacetate over here, and remember we said it is made from pyruvate, so that's what you see happening. But you also see that oxaloacetate has a reversible arrow back into pyruvate. What that means is that oxaloacetate can also reverse back up into pyruvate as well. Now, the reason this is important is because it explains to us why the last set of amino acids was glucogenic. Remember, we said the third pathway for the amino acids was entering straight into the TCA cycle, and we said those were also glucogenic. Technically, when we say they're entering into the TCA cycle, the way they're doing that is by being made into oxaloacetate. So the third pathway of amino acids that had an arrow going into the TCA cycle was actually being converted into oxaloacetate. So now the amino acids have been converted into oxaloacetate, and since this step is reversible, the oxaloacetate can then reverse back up into pyruvate. But we also know pyruvate is reversible into glucose, so that's going to be how those amino acids can make glucose. So again, the last set of amino acids entered straight into the TCA cycle, and we said they were glucogenic. The reason they are glucogenic is because the way they enter the TCA cycle is by being converted into oxaloacetate. Oxaloacetate can reverse into pyruvate, and then pyruvate can reverse into glucose. So that's how we can make glucose out of that last set of amino acids. Now, that is just a side note, since I had mentioned that I would explain how that last set of amino acids was glucogenic. But let's go ahead and get back to the acetyl-CoA and how it's going to enter the cycle at this point. So we said the acetyl-CoA cannot enter the TCA cycle without combining with oxaloacetate. So here we have acetyl-CoA combining with oxaloacetate, and then they're going to go through the cycle together. Now, there are only a few things that I want you guys to pick up from this cycle. The first thing is to notice what is happening to the structure. As you can see, the structure is getting smaller and smaller, and that is because we are removing one carbon at a time as we go through the pathway. So the first thing that I want you to know is that when acetyl-CoA combines with oxaloacetate and enters the cycle, one carbon is going to be released at a time. And remember, anytime we break something off, we are also releasing hydrogens and electrons. And so that's why you see that over here. Hydrogens and electrons are still being released, and our coenzymes are still collecting them so that we can cash them out for energy. Now, when we release carbons, another thing is going to be released as well, which is our energy. Remember, when we break something off, that means it's a catabolic reaction, and catabolic reactions release energy. So just to recap, acetyl-CoA is going to combine with oxaloacetate so that it can enter the cycle. As they go through the cycle, one carbon will be removed at a time. Since the carbon is being removed and released, what's also being released in the process is hydrogens and electrons. And since we are breaking something off and it's catabolic, we are also releasing energy as well. So I want you guys to know that oxaloacetate needs to combine with acetyl-CoA before it can enter, and I want you to know what is being released out of the TCA cycle, and that is carbons, hydrogens, electrons, and our energy. So that is the gist of what I want you guys to know from our TCA cycle.